Hello and welcome to Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges. Now today I want to talk labour. Now this of course is in relation to the 1st of May because of course the 1st of May was International Labour Day or Workers' Day, and we want to now look at the Q4 Labour Report because that now becomes very relevant. Promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment and decent work for all remains one of the most daunting challenges facing Zimbabwe. On the one hand, economic growth in the country has not been inclusive and fast enough to absorb the growing labour force into the formal sector. In fact, the majority of the labour force in Zimbabwe is in the informal sector. While unemployment rates in the country are relatively low, informal employment is widespread. According to the 2023 Q4 Labour Survey, 87.7% of the employed population were informally employed. That's up from 75.6% in 2019. Informal employment is characterised by lower productivity, lower pay, limited social protection coverage, high levels of working poverty, and poor working conditions in general. More importantly, high levels of informality limit the capacity of the state to sustainably mobilize domestic resources and also effectively deploy micro and macroeconomic policies such as a national budget and monetary policies to promote decent work. The lack of sufficient, full, productive and decent jobs is complicating efforts to end poverty in the country and ensure prosperity for all. This program seeks to dissect the state of decent work and economic growth in Zimbabwe, as well as the challenges and opportunities in the Zimbabwean labour market. And to help us do that, I will be joined by Dr Prosper Chitambara from the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, Hodges. Don't go away. Beyond the Dollar. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Beyond the Dollar. I'm Andy Hodges, and this is ATM Prime broadcasting to you from our studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. Now, I can't talk labour without talking about one important other issue, and that, of course, is Sustainable Development Goal 8, or SDG 8. Now, that SDG seeks to promote sustained, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. It reaffirms the mutually supportive relationship between economic, social, and environmental policies, full employment and decent work. Achieving SDG 8 is crucial for ending all forms of poverty and ensuring that no one is left behind. I'm now joined by Dr Prosper Chitambara from the Labour and Economic Development Research Institute of Zimbabwe, Hodges, to discuss the 2023 Q4 Labour Force Survey. Prosper, welcome to Beyond the Dollar.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, of course, we're looking, Prosper, at the 2023 Q4 Labour Force Survey produced by Zimstat. We are, of course, waiting for Q1 to come out in the next, hopefully, few weeks or so. But let's just get your overall thoughts. You've seen the report, you've read the report, you've seen that high percentage, over 87, almost 88% in the informal sector. What are your thoughts on that 2023 Q4 Labour Force Survey?
I think it points a very somber picture in terms of our labour market, the fact that we are seeing increasing levels of informality. Obviously, that's not good for the economy. It presents a significant amount of challenges. Of course, there are also opportunities, but a lot of challenges, not just for the government, but even for the people that are actually subsisting in the informal economy. For the government, on the one hand, it affects their capacity to be able to generate domestic resources, because normally the higher the levels of informality, the lower the tax base.
Because what you're talking about, in essence, I mean, let's just round it up to 88% informal.
Yes,
so you're talking about 12% formal.
Yes,
which means that that is the only 12% that the government can raise any money from, is from that 12%. The rest of the 88% are pretty much underneath the radar.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And we're also seeing that there is growing, actually, informality. When you look at around 2017, we were at, on average, about 84% informal employment. So now at 87.7%, it means we actually informalize, the economy is actually informalizing, so to speak.
There's a bit of a dichotomy, if that's the right word for it, in that we're talking here about an economy which on the one hand appears to be working in certain sectors. It's working.
Yes,
tourism, mining, I think are good, and even
definitely.
agriculture to a certain degree are sectors that are working where employment is going up based on the productivity increases. But on the other side, you're talking about people that can't find formal employment, but they are finding employment in the informal sector.
I think the challenge has been that the formal economy has not been creating adequate, full and productive employment opportunities for the people that seek employment. So when you look at the sectors that are underpinning even the growth that we've experienced in the past few years, these are sectors that are largely capital intensive and not necessarily labor intensive.
What about the argument from the government? Because the government, of course, says that one of their priorities is to create jobs. That's been the case all the way back from to 2018. Government has come in, Second Republic said we're going to create jobs, and even the government says, look, we actually have created jobs, but the jobs have been created in the informal sector. Is there any truth to that type of argument?
Yeah, definitely. There is actually truth. It's actually true that we are creating jobs, but we are creating jobs in the informal economy. So when you look at how they define, say, for example, employment technically, so for a person to be employed, he must be involved in some form of economic activity over a reference period for pay or for a profit. So even if you are selling juice carts by the street corner, or tomatoes at the market, you actually technically defined is actually employed.
But the gap is how much you're putting into the fiscus. So you're employed, but it may not be productive enough in terms of putting money into the economy.
That's why the International Labour Organization have come up with the concept of decent work.
Let's talk about this, because it is a word that's used a lot. And so when you say to someone like me, decent work, I kind of have this impression that there's levels of work, and that doing that is decent, doing this isn't decent. Maybe I've got it completely wrong. Can you define decent work? And exactly what does it mean and why is it important?
So when they talk about decent work, so it's a term actually that was coined by the National Labour Organization, which really is in charge of SDG number 8. So that's a UN agency which is responsible for promoting social justice through decent work, employment creation opportunities. So these are opportunities for work that is, number one, productive, work that delivers a fair income. And now they also talk about the concept of a living wage. So this is also work that delivers on social security. This is also work that delivers on social protection. This is also work that delivers on even your prospects for personal development within an organization.
Which, of course, takes out the entire informal sector. Because pay is not monitored, just like it would be in the formal sector. They don't have any social protection, so if they lose their jobs or they get ill, that's it, unless they have savings. So you're saying that a lot of the informal sector in this survey is not decent work?
No, it's not decent work,
It's not decent work.
So decent work also provides opportunities for equal treatment between men and women. So I think that's very, very important. The issues of gender equality, now it's a cross-cutting issue across even all the SDGs. So gender equality must be at the center
Let's talk about challenges. Now, I think one challenge you said was that we're not creating enough formal employment in the sector. But the other labour market challenges, or even I can say bottlenecks in the labour market that need to be addressed.
No, I think the biggest one, obviously, is the fact that we are not, well, there are a number of them, we are not creating enough full and productive employment opportunities, number one. And also even the pattern of our growth has not been inclusive and sustained. And in fact, one of the key pillars under SDG number 8 is to ensure that economies are actually growing fast enough, they are growing inclusively enough. So we need job-rich growth. So they also talk about job-rich growth or employment-intensive growth.
But Prosper, this gets very complicated. Because on the one side, you're linking the growth of the labour market to the growth of an economy. So therefore, the question comes in, of course, is that given the mainstream unemployment, how important is that to macroeconomic policies, and how can that be done? Because you have low growth, which is globally now. This year is going to be low growth. In Zimbabwe in particular, we've got the El Nino, which can then have influence, of course, labour markets. At the same time, which obviously means that the economy isn't performing as good as it should be due to exterior forces. That means, obviously, the labour market is obviously constrained too. So the linkage between mainstream employment and macroeconomic policies.
Well, it's very, very important, Andy. And in fact, we are seeing the world over, in most developed economies, actually, now they are ensuring that employment creation is at the heart of macroeconomic policies, both your national budget and your monetary policy. When you look at the monetary policy, a number of central banks, New Zealand has pioneered what they call dual mandate monetary policy framework. The US also is following that dual mandate monetary policy framework, where you're not just focusing on price stability, which is very, very critical, but you're also focusing on employment creation. And in America, jobs that...
How can you do that, though? Because it is very difficult, isn't it? I mean, you have the Minister of Finance standing up in November, putting out a budget. And if he does a dual budget, as you talked about...
One way of doing that for the national budget, for example, is by ensuring that you also come up with specific or quantifiable targets in terms of employment creation, and you're also focusing on labor-intensive sectors. For example, the agricultural sector, that's a highly labor-intensive sector. And you're also making sure that you promote, for example, even youth employment, because that's also a major issue. Because when you look at the...
Youth and women employment is a major issue.
Because the youth and the women are also predominant, again, in the informal economy. So you're also coming up with incentives that seek to promote youth and women employment. So and obviously also, the issue of sustainable enterprise has also become critical. You then also need to come up with incentives that promote sustainable businesses and enterprises.
But you're doing this, of course, in a backdrop of an informal sector.
Yeah.
So, in essence, how can you link, when you're doing your budgetary pronouncements, link job creation in an economy where 87.7% are informal? It sort of can't work, can it?
No, it can work actually, and you also need to, I know as a country we've come up with a national formalization strategy. In fact, that's one of the key recommendations from the National Labour Organization for governments, because SDG 8 also seeks to ensure that we are actually formalizing not just our labor markets, but also formalizing our economies. So we then need to come up with, of course, in Zimbabwe, we've come up with a comprehensive national formalization strategy. So we need to then implement that, because that formalization strategy basically is looking at some of the key drivers of the high levels of informality, and also proffering prescriptions and recommendations on how that can be addressed. So that national formalization strategy must also then be linked to your macroeconomic policies, both the national budget and also even the mandate policy.
Okay, but yes, you say that and it sounds great, but you still you're still stuck with a structural problem here, right?
Yeah, it is.
In the sense that here I am, I've been an informal player. I have my nice business, even if I have grown it a little bit and have 4 or 5 people, whether it's selling vegetables, potatoes, or even making a product like beds or whatever. Okay, I haven't been paying taxes. I haven't been paying any government levies. I've been paying, say, no city of Hawaii, whatever. Say, I effectively have been probably paying someone to rent a little space, paying people in cash, getting paid in cash. I'm completely underneath the radar when it comes to putting fiscus into the money. So why should I formalize? At the end of the day, what is my benefit to formalize? So to me, that's a structural problem.
It is actually. Well, obviously there are a number of benefits in terms of formalization. It enhances your opportunities for accessing for credit and finance, and even accessing markets. But of course, you also then need to come up with the right kind of incentives for these guys in the informal, for example, informal business operators to want to formalize. And the tax incentives actually then become critical. Because one reason why businesses may prefer to remain informal is because they don't want to pay their high taxes.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're the one. In fact, I think I had a conversation with you, and I was talking about formal business, and they say those additional costs can be as high as 22% of their costs. All of those fees, commissions, taxes, and everything, right?
So in terms of your formalization strategy now, you have to then address all those factors and those drivers for the high levels of informality. So the World Bank did a study for the DRC. They actually realized that the high taxes in the DRC were actually promoting high levels of informality.
And also as well, and it also leads to another issue, which is equally important to Zimbabwean citizens, which is the cost of product. Because it's cheaper to go and buy from the informal sector than from the formal sector because of the structural problems. And that's also another problem as well, because the moment that you formalize, those prices go up, which makes it more expensive for me as a citizen to buy from them. I mean, would that be a true statement?
That's a true statement, indeed. That's why I think we need to look at it from a comprehensive perspective, where you also address the doing business environment, so that ultimately we address the huge competitiveness gap that we actually have as an economy. So at the heart again of decent work is the concept of sustainable enterprises. So we need to ensure that our enterprises are sustainable, and to ensure that they have to address the doing business environment.
Exactly, because sustainability in the informal sector, in other words, you're trying to sustain something you don't know exists to a certain degree.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's time for us to take a breather. Now, after the break, I will continue my conversation with Dr. Prosper Chitambara from Hodges. We're looking at the Q4 Labour Survey report issued by Zimstat, because labour is critical. Of course, May the 1st was International Workers' Day, so it's very relevant that we talk about the state of labour in Zimbabwe. After the breather, we'll also talk about our attainment, or if we are able to attain SDG 8. Don't go away. Beyond the Dollar. We'll be right back.
It is a real puzzle how crystal meth has made its way into communities and continues to ravage the youth. This is where it all begins. Is enough focus being put on mental health?
Back to Beyond the Dollar. This, of course, is Etienne Prime coming to you from our studios in Harare, Zimbabwe. I'm Andy Hodges. Today we're looking at and analysing the Q4 2023 Labour Survey, which is issued by Zimstat. And I'm doing that in studio with Dr. Prosper Chitambara from Hodges. Prosper, the numbers I looked at, interesting numbers, 87.7%, up from what? Just under 79% previously. These numbers they're scary because it shows in a way that only a very small amount of business in this country or individuals are sustaining all the things that 100% of citizens need: hospitals, schools, roads. Okay, and that becomes a worry because it obviously means that guys like me and you are paying taxes. We haven't formally employed.
We're carrying a huge burden.
We're carrying a huge burden.
The financing,
and that is the one thing. Maybe just to recap before we move on about SDG 8. I mean, that is the one thing that is a worry about how to get that, formalizing that informal sector to get them to contribute to the fiscus effectively.
It is, and so it means only a very few people are carrying a huge burden in terms of financing of critical sectors.
That's like just not sustainable.
Health, your education,
I mean, and when you think that, 4 to 6 billion US is
what is also meant or implied end is that government is able to also even over-rely on donors to finance even healthcare, even education, and even social protection itself, which is a key pillar under the decent work agenda.
So the concept of domestic resource mobilization becomes really difficult.
Oh, it's very difficult.
I mean, it's almost, I wouldn't say impossible, but it's extremely difficult.
Then difficult to sustainably finance development.
Now, you did talk about enterprises, and enterprises being key to ensuring economic growth and employment creation. Promotion of sustainable enterprise at the heart of decent work. So you've mentioned this a couple of times before the breather. So what measures do we need in Zimbabwe to ensure that Zimbabwean enterprises are more sustainable and competitive?
I think it's really about the doing business environment. It's been challenging. Yes, there has been some reforms, but in terms of the cost of doing business in Zimbabwe it still remains on the very high side.
But is that the only thing, Prosper? Because the cost of doing business, I appreciate that. That is a sort of statutory obligation, if I can call it that. But then again, sustainable enterprises also means product to market, quality product, product that people need, understanding what the market is. I mean,
ethical business practices.
Yeah, so it's a lot more complicated than that to have sustainable enterprises.
No, it's always good to look at it from a more comprehensive perspective, obviously. So issues of ethics, I think they're also very important, ensuring that at least businesses are also complying with the regulations, the laws in the economy. Also, they are providing adequate social protection coverage to their employees. providing
get to that.
a living wage again.
Let's get to that.
So,
I mean, before I get to social protection, I think something just popped in my head is that, at the end of the day, when you are in the informal sector and you want a sustainable enterprise, okay, there are things that they don't follow. So if they sell you a product that is defective, you have no recourse.
Oh, yeah.
You can't go to the Consumer Council of Zimbabwe and say, by the way, Andy sold me something, because that guy may not even be there tomorrow. He could have moved to a new location and so forth. So these are issues when you're dealing with the informal. In fact, training in the informal sector gives the consumer less protection.
Definitely. That's why we must be promoting formalization of these enterprises.
Okay.
So at least we also provide, like you say, consumer protection to the consumer.
Now, social protection. I think you again, I deferred this question, but now it's important. Now, social protection, of course, is an essential part of decent work.
Yes, it is.
How can the government sustainably finance social protection in Zimbabwe, given the high levels of both poverty and inequality?
I think that's a major challenge, Andy, for government. Of course, we've seen government coming up with different taxes. I think ultimately it's about government being very innovative, not just in terms of raising revenues through taxes, but also even reprioritization of expenditures. And I believe there are a number of opportunities for us to be able to reduce certain non-productive spending and allocating those savings towards productive spending. And by productive spending, social protection is a critical example, is a good example rather of productive spending. So when you look at most governments, especially in the low-income economies, there are always ample opportunities for reallocation of spending, especially the non-productive spending. We seem to spend a lot of money on non-productive expenditures.
But I have an issue, because we did, okay, there's a good example of social protection, and that is COVID-19. If I look at Zimbabwe,
yes.
how we had to put in social protection measures to cover millions of people. Yet effectively, after analysing that, it looked as if the social protection streamed to people. People were not getting the money. A lot of money was spent on administration. A lot of money wasn't spent on getting to the right people. We couldn't get the money to them because they didn't have mobile money lines.
That's
Their
a good
names
example.
were wrong.
That's a good example of part of the non-productive spending that we need to be addressing. And one way of addressing that could be through fully embracing e-government. So at least we remove a lot of those that unnecessary, maybe in quotes unnecessary.
Yes, I agree, but that's at the process of getting. But there's still those out there in the rural areas. They may be in poverty, they may be hungry because they don't have enough food, because maybe the El Nino drought. They need social protection.
Definitely.
They can't get on. If they get on the list, they don't get the money. I mean, I remember the target was 1 million people. I think they only did 200,000 or something. So I mean, there seems to be also a structural problem of getting money to. So we need to get that database up to scratch. We need to say, okay, do we know all the people who are vulnerable? And how can we get the money to them effectively possible?
Yes. That would be very, very important, Andy, because otherwise a lot of people are actually not being covered by our current social protection mechanisms. Right. In fact, the ILO, in low-income economies, about 3/4 actually of people are actually not covered by social.
Exactly.
That must be on social protection are not covered.
Are not covered. So that's something that, as Zimbabwe, we definitely need to look up.
A lot of those people
I mean, the fact is, we mustn't leave anyone behind. If someone is struggling, someone can't eat, someone is in poverty, we need to look after those people.
Or
have a disability.
It's part of social protection.
We need to look after them. Okay. Now, social dialogue. Now, this is something that for many years we've talked about this. There's been the tripartite forum, there's been social dialogue, and it's obviously key to decent work. But of course, the first question is, what is social dialogue? Who should be talking? You understand me? Because again, every social dialogue I've seen, I don't see any informal sector in there. I don't see anybody representing the informal sector. It's more the formal guys, the unions.
That's a good point.
So why is it important, and what is the state of social dialogue in Zimbabwe?
So social dialogue is very important, and like you rightly pointed out, it's one of the 4 pillars under decent work. So social dialogue, involves or entails dialogue by social partners or by the critical stakeholders within the economy. Of course, in most economies, most countries, actually, social dialogue has been tripartite, which is very problematic. You correctly highlighted that the people in the informal economy must be part and parcel of social dialogue. That's why I always make reference to the South African case study. In South Africa, they have NEDLAC. So the NEDLAC, actually, that's their social dialogue platform in South Africa. But it actually brings on board not just the usual 3 social partners, but also even the communities and also those in the informal economy.
So we need to. So you're saying
must
you're
be
calling for broadening of our
Yes,
broadening of our
yes,
social
yes.
dialogue. There
To
may be different
include-
meetings,
to
but it shouldn't
include-
just be formal people.
No.
Because what good is that?
We need to include the informal economy.
Yeah.
We include the communities, the faith-based organizations, community-based organizations under the different chambers. I think we can learn from New Zealand is also a good example. South Africa, obviously, closer to home. Yeah, so it helps to make sure that there is consensus and buy-in in terms of whatever policies actually government is proposing to implement.
Yeah, because I see your point. Because if the informal sector, which is 87.7%, buys into these social dialogue conversations,
there's
then
a greater
obviously it
likelihood
dies
that
into the money, the
policy is
budget,
going to be
the
effective.
policies. And they'll follow them because now they actually
In fact,
support
according to the World Bank, one of the key reasons why there's policy failure, especially in the low-income economies, is because of that lack of buy-in and support by all the critical stakeholders.
Now, the ILO, International Labour Organization, has agreed on a formal definition for living wage and endorsed living wage policies. Now, I want to talk about living wage because it's one area when you're in the informal economy you have no control over. I come and I say, Prosper, I want to hire you to be a carpenter. I'll pay you $100 a month. Right? But normally you should be getting paid $500 a month. But what can you do? Because you need a job. This guy's giving at least $100 a month. So that's a problem. So what exactly is a living wage? I know we have the poverty datum line. So what is it and why is it important to have a living wage policy?
Yeah, so now in fact, the International Labour Organization has come up with an agreement, in fact, all the partners actually, that constitute the ILO. So the ILO's constituents are government, labor and employers. So they actually agreed on what a living wage is. So this is actually a wage that actually enables an employee to be able to earn a decent living.
To live, basically. For food, school fees, transport.
And in fact, even here in Zimbabwe, the Zimstat actually calculates what they call the food poverty line per person and also the poverty datum line. And at global level, the World Bank has come up with the concept of a global poverty line, which is currently set at $2.15 per day.
Can you put that living wage and apply it in the informal sector? Can you? I mean, how can you? Because if you think about it, they should also be covered by this minimum wage, right?
They should
or this decent wage, if I can.
They should actually be.
How
the only challenge with the informal is that most of the operators are just barely getting by. So, but again, the concept of a living wage also takes into account the peculiarities of the sectors. And one of the key principles, again, under a living wage is the concept of social dialogue. There must be dialogue between, for example, the employer and the employee. And there must be an evidence-based formulation of that living wage.
But it appears that everything you're saying works nicely in the formal sector.
Yes.
It all breaks down when you now get informal.
It
all breaks down.
So
I
think that's
basically,
why we
until
must
formalize
support the formalization.
Yeah, because until we do,
it's difficult to
very,
apply
very difficult.
the concept of a living wage in a formal economy.
Right.
In an informal economy setup.
Now, sorry, you mentioned again, what's the average minimum wage in Zimbabwe?
So, as the December last year, we were actually $240. That was the average minimum wage.
$240 a month.
Yes.
Okay. And how does that compare in the region?
Regionally. South Africa, they also published the quarterly employment statistics survey. So in South Africa, the average earnings, they call it average earnings per month, is around $1,200. So it actually means that there always been incentives, obviously.
Okay, but take into account the size of the economy. Okay, I mean, obviously, let's take into account the size of the economy.
But the point I wanted to raise is that there always been incentive for Zimbabwean professionals to seek employment in South Africa.
Because why work here for 200?
Our young professionals, I was looking at the numbers. So a nurse in Zimbabwe is taking home on average about $500, including allowances. A nurse in South Africa is taking home around $1,300.
So therefore, that's why we have a brain drain.
That's why we have a brain drain.
Right. So are we on course to achieve SDG 8? Because
SDG 8 we are not on course, Andy.
We're not.
Because one of the key targets under SDG 8 is that our per capita income growth must be 7% per annum. And we are nowhere near those numbers, yeah.
So 2030, but then again, I think most countries in the world are not going to achieve the SDGs by 2030. In fact, they've admitted it, haven't they?
No country actually is actually.
So in fact, they're going to move that 2030. There's no doubt about it.
Definitely.
Right, finally, Prosper, because I know, me and you, we can talk all day, particularly when it comes to issues that do affect our country. What can be done in Zimbabwe to ensure sustained and inclusive growth? I emphasize that word, inclusive growth.
I think, Andy, the first point is the issue of social dialogue. I think we need to to broaden our social and strengthen our social dialogue or institutions. So in Zimbabwe, we've created actually the TNF, and it's actually enacted. But like we were arguing, we need to ensure that it's broadened to include those in the informal economy. Because once you're able to get some consensus on what needs to be done to address the challenges around decent work and inclusive growth, I think if the job is actually done.
And there is one issue, of course. Let me just say this: the fact is that a lot of formal companies are closing down some of their operations. So in essence, that 88% looks like it may even go up because a lot of formal companies are shutting down because they can't sustain, they can't compete with the informal sector.
This year, Andy, with the El Nino-induced drought, it's going to affect a lot of companies.
Okay. Well, that's it for Beyond the Dollar. I, of course, have been talking to Dr. Prosper Chitambara from Ledgers, examining and discussing the Q4 Labour Survey report, which is issued by Zimstat. This program was brought to you by Ledgers in partnership with ZTN Prime. Prosper, thank you so much for appearing on Beyond the Dollar, sir.
Thank you so much.
All right, you take care. And we'll obviously be continuing our conversations in the future.
Yes.
Well, that's all that we have for Beyond the Dollar today. I'm Andy Hodges. Goodbye, and please, you all be safe.